Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, episode 26, our first anniversary episode. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Sylvain Charlebois.
The Food Professor is brought to you by Omnovos, the digital customer engagement solution for grocery and restaurant marketers, helping you deliver personalized and segmented experiences at scale. Find out how you could get personal and grow sales by making every customer interaction count with Omnovos at realcustomerengagement.com. All right, Sylvain, it's a solo episode today. I've got you all to myself, so I'm looking forward to our episode today. I want to start out at the beginning. Where's the beef? You guys put out a great beef survey, and I was really and did you? It was done with Angus Reid. Did you do that on purpose? That was a breed of cattle. You had to choose Angus Reid.
Oh my God. This is the first time I actually thought about that. I never actually made the link between the two. Well, as you know, Michael, Angus Reid is one of our great partners at the lab. And we thought about going to field to ask what Canadians about beef consumption. Because as you know, last episode, we talked about Epicurious's decision to ban beef from its new recipes. And we also heard from very well-known restaurants going vegan as well in recent days. So we thought, well, it's barbecue season now, and I know you're a big fan of barbecues. You have, I don't know, a lot full of barbecues. Yeah, and you're not much of a beef eater, but we thought, well, do Canadians have a beef with beef, essentially?
Yeah. And, it was a great, quick study. It was a good read, though, and a couple of things jumped out at me. So 92% of Canadians are beef eaters, which I guess it wasn't a high number. I don't, maybe it was higher than I thought, 92%. What was interesting, 65% are regular beef eaters. That was the data I was looking for. Okay, every now and then I eat beef, 92%, get that. 65% were regular beef eaters. The one thing I thought was really interesting was when you started breaking it down regionally. So, and some were no surprise. More people eat beef in Alberta than BC. No surprise there. One thing that surprised me, I'd love to get your thoughts on it, is in the province of Quebec, there was the most concern when people thought of it about the environment connected to beef. And that was one of the provinces that said, that could throw me on the not eat beef side. Did that surprise you at all that Quebec would be thinking like that? Quebecers would be thinking like that?
Not really. I mean, both BC and Quebec are probably they're in the same boat here when it comes to the environment. BC is the vegan capital of Canada. One vegan in four, 25% of vegans in Canada actually live in BC. So it's a huge.
Yeah.
I mean, beef consumption in BC is clearly an issue for a lot of people. In Quebec, no, there's been a lot of discussions about the environment. As you know, both BC and Quebec, they both have had a carbon tax for more than a decade now, more so than any other provinces. And so they are more inclined to think about the environment naturally. And of course, that thinking is clearly impacting how Quebecers are seeing animal proteins in general.
It was a big number, right? 54% are concerned about the environment when thinking of beef. It made me think of two things, the study. You may remember back when Ronald Reagan, way back when, and they were starting to talk about global warming, and he said, it's just the cattle. And he was kind of mocked for it, but he wasn't entirely wrong either. Just picking a piece of data out. But you and I know that there's a full circle of both nutrition and a full circle of the environment. Is this a story connected to the environment that the cattle industry is not telling well enough to Canadians? Because it seems to be, aside from some health issues or a little bit of, squeamishness, that seems to be the biggest issue connected to beef right now.
Probably, I would agree with that. I think, the older generations, I don't think there's much happening there. It's the younger generations, the Zeds and the millennials. They're really thinking about this very differently. And of course, they're overwhelmed by the messages coming from lobby groups, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. I was, as we talked about this 2 weeks ago, I was a little bit concerned about Epicurious's rationale. The decision for them to ditch beef is entirely their decision. It's a business decision, but saying that we're not including beef anymore because of the environment is a bit misleading. It's like saying that all cars are made the same way. I mean, beef can be
Right.
produced in many different ways. I mean, we did talk about Angus, but there are different breeds, different practices, different
Yeah.
environments, different protocols. I mean, and frankly, grazing and producing beef has been part of our agricultural ecosystems for a very, very long time. And when you think about
Yeah.
the outputs, the manure, and everything else you need to make sure that both animal and vegetable proteins survive and grow. I mean, beef is really in the middle of that. The challenge, of course, is that beef is a very expensive animal protein. That has come up. It's not the first time we actually survey Canadians on beef consumption, but clearly, Michael, for the first time, price is there. There's the environment, animal
Mm.
cruelty, health. We get it,
Yeah.
but price is creeping up there.
Yeah, particularly I saw for those with household incomes of 50,000 and below are more inclined of the trifecta to substitute out, right? Go to chicken or go to pork. I just bought a couple of steaks for the household from a great local butcher, Cumbres, and they raised the beef and the pork, but it was $100 for two ribeyes.
Yeah.
But they were like spectacular, best ever, kind of like, I rationalize that because very easily because at the end of the day, if you went to a restaurant, you would be paying much more than that. So, which connects me to another article. Let me jump over to something. You were quoted in an article in the National Post about the 4 reasons why that food prices are going up. Food is getting more expensive for these 4 reasons, and 3 of them made sense to me. One of them didn't make sense, and I wanted to ask you about it. The one that didn't make sense was we're eating at home. And the article seemed to say, hey, because we're eating at home, food prices are going up and consumption is going up. That didn't make any sense to me because it felt like all that's happened is I'm not having my sandwich at Tim Hortons. I'm having my sandwich at home for lunch. But I don't
Yep.
think, notwithstanding the pandemic 15, the COVID 15, that food consumption net hasn't gone up. And I actually thought it would have gone down because we're paying more for food in grocery stores, which isn't at restaurant prices. What did you think of that one particular element?
Well, I mean, the demand is there. I mean, it's all about demand elasticity. I think demand
Mm,
is there. Demand is robust. We're still most of the country is still under lockdown,
yeah,
and so demand is actually quite predictable, and predictability pays for grocers in particular. If you know what flow you should be getting or you will be getting in your store, you can play around with prices favorably to increase your margins. And that's kind of what I meant. And again, it's always a slippery slope because the last thing you want to suggest is that the industry is out there to gouge people, which is not the case. I mean, there grocers are
there's too
often
much competition, and there's too much competition. I mean, there's even
yeah,
though it's centralized, you just the big grocers will butt heads with each other on a day to day basis. There's not a lot of margin to
exactly.
be grabbed there.
Yeah, yeah, and I think often grocers are unfairly criticized for gouging consumers. It's not the I mean their margins are not very very high, and so it's all
Yeah.
about predictability and making sure they
Mm,
support their margins as much as possible. So that's kind of what I meant. As we experience our one dose spring and summer, according to our prime minister. I think more and more people will get out, but also
yeah.
expect some really high menu prices out there this summer. Oh my God, because restaurateurs know you want that sandwich, you want that pizza on the patio, you want that beer in a pub, like really desperately. So they'll charge you for it.
Yeah. Well, and God bless them. I mean, at the end of the day, we've talked to many restaurateurs, and you often hear it's a hard business to make money at. Well, go ahead and make some money. Like this is the time now to restructure. If consumers expect to have that experience, you do have to pay for it. Like
Oh,
these things,
exactly.
people need to make a living wage who work in those kitchens, and the owners of those businesses need to make need to make a wage. Let me actually pivot off. Speaking of pivot, let me pivot off that. What do you think of this massive support bill in the United States? $28.9 or $28.6 billion restaurant recovery initiative in the U.S. It's about to be signed into law. It looks like it's going to sail through with a plus or minus 28 billion. And as I read it, it looks like restaurants can apply and say, what were your sales in 2019 or 2020 minus 2019? We'll give you the balance. It's like, we'll make it all up to you. It seems blockbuster to me. I wonder if we can expect something similar in the Canadian context.
You're a funny guy, Michael. I'm probably thinking right now, Restaurants Canada will want to change its name to Restaurant USA as quickly as possible. I mean, the Canadian government clearly has shown its discomfort towards supporting the private sector in general. Look at what happened with the airlines. And with food service, it's the same thing. I think Ottawa is just banking on resiliency. Yes, we will lose 25, 30% of our restaurants, but others will come. And of course, Cisco, Gordon Foods, different suppliers will be picking up the bill for like a lot of unpaid bills, of course. They're the banks, right? And so they're
and the
absorbing.
Farmers. Yeah.
So while the White House or the American government is supporting industry in Canada, it's really up to the suppliers. Suppliers are playing the government's role, really, unfortunately.
You know, going back to our last conversation with Restaurants Canada, they seem to be putting their chips on the bet of wage subsidies through to spring 2022 rather than asking for the big handout. But it seems to be effective. Now, of course, the U.S. context is different. Every consumer is getting a $1,400 check. It's putting that economy into hyperdrive. We'll see at the end of the day which is the best solution.
My concern is inflation. To be honest, numbers came out this morning: 4.1% in U.S. Last month. That's starting to be very high. So the bill coming from the United States government is probably going to help. I mean, restaurateurs won't feel compelled to charge as much because they'll have money. So that's going to help. But in Canada, we are expecting a much higher inflation rate, and the Biden administration is going to flood the U.S. with a lot of public money. So we are expecting high inflation rates in North America for the next few months, and that's scaring markets right now.
Interesting. It also seems to be pushing money into dog coin, this whole dog coin thing, which is oh my God. What kind of economy are we running where an entrepreneur goes on Saturday Night Live and talks about a currency and it comes up and drops? You know, these are unusual days. Not that I have to remind you that these are unusual days, but there's just another example. Dog coin. Well, I'm going to put all my money in dog coin.
They are entrepreneurs, and there's Elon Musk. I think there are two different things.
Yeah, he's a different cat, that's for sure. Yeah. I don't have a segue from cat other than dead cat bounce. If you ever heard that phrase, you know what a dead cat bounce is? It's something in the stock market where you see a stock kind of go up, but is really nothing supporting it, so it just plummets right down. Dead cat bounce. I love cats, by the way. Don't send me notes and quotes, audience. But I actually think that's going to happen in retail, that you're going to see this big flood of people shopping because, I'm in Toronto, in Halifax, same thing right now. You're kind of constrained to where you could shop. And then people are going to rush out and buy, and it's going to be, holy great, this is going to be great. But then it's going to just ebb right off because I think it's going to be an unnatural demand. Anyway, it's going to go up and down. Retailers are just going to try and get their heads around, what do my sales look like? How do I index? Let's move on to another point. So you published the Canadian Food Manufacturing Report. So I was going through that report. You got a bit of news on it. So some interesting results. Certainly we've talked about here that we've had a few successes during the course of our 1 year doing the podcast. Heinz in Montreal. You've seen the brewers start to brew more local beers in London, Ontario. Yeah. Reading through the report, My question, I guess, about the report was, as I look at it and all the elements that are causing or constraining domestic manufacturing, some of them feel like they apply everywhere. Is the difference local government subsidies? Because I know that states in the US are very aggressive in terms of attracting manufacturing. That's not typically the same here. But when I tick off the boxes, high input costs, shortage of labor, we heard that from Sylvie Cloutier, 7,000 people they're trying to fill jobs with, high wages, high equipment costs, higher input costs, grocery fees. Are some of these uniquely Canadian? And what is the solution? Is it a mix of government intervention vis-a-vis subsidies to create employment? What are your thoughts coming out of that report?
Well, first of all, it was a really fun report to do. It took us about 8 months to write our team, and we did it for the Association Food Health and Consumer Products Canada, and they've been very supportive of the report. They actually allowed us to do whatever we wanted. The intent was to basically look at performance metrics. And we actually designed a model. We picked 24 different performance metrics, and that's why you saw the dashboard with 24 different ones. And food manufacturing in Canada is not doing too badly with based on many of them. I mean, yeah, that's right. And so I think you're right. I mean, there are things that we could improve. Essentially, we need a paradigm shift in Canada. We need to recognize the role of food manufacturing as much as possible, and the role of the state also should change. Attracting investments is not easy, and the one thing that the government has done, I think, quite well in recent years is the creation of super clusters for the agri-food sector. Protein Industries Canada, I think, is working. It's only been in operation for a couple of years, but it's working. It's attracting investments from abroad. It's creating clusters of innovation. It's getting people to think about the value chain from farm to fork, not just about growing yields and exporting. It's about adding value to your own commodities. And so if we can replicate that for other commodities and other sectors, that would be great. I mean, I think right now there's too much, I would say, private initiatives going on. Like President's Choice, to me, is the most effective super cluster we have in the agri-food sector in Canada. It's very effective. It's very well run. Essentially, if you look at Loblaw as a company, most of its value comes from President's Choice, and we talked about that when Galen Weston Senior passed. I mean, he was the architect behind President's Choice, and he basically built that supercluster. What we need, but that supercluster is closed and private. It only serves one company. So what we need to do is to figure out a way to replicate that model many different times, to support many different sectors, to generate more wealth and create these brands. Like Red Bull, when I was in Austria in 2015, I was actually half an hour away from Red Bull's office, and it's in the middle of nowhere, like nowhere in Austria. And there you are, Red Bull, a well-known brand around the world from Austria. And it was able to build a powerhouse. But the innovation, the research, and the support came from a cluster of different companies. And so it's not just about Maple Leaf and Loblaw. It allows. It's enabling conditions to support more vertical coordination. Essentially, that's what we need.
Well, I guess there's two compelling reasons to pursue it. One is, that Canada moves its agricultural strategy from one of being purveyors of raw materials perpetually that get the value added somewhere else, and then domestic sovereignty of control of your own food supply. We've seen that, and I think you make the case about vaccine development, right? We're a small country. We're behest at our friends when it comes down to getting vaccines. So let's start making here. The economics may not make the same sense. It may make at the margin more economics to get it from somewhere else. But then there's a sovereignty and a security issue that seems to override and call for more industry cooperation and what do you think the path forward? It's a great report, red, yellow, green kind of matrix about what's important. That's what I love about the report, by the way, because there's a lot of factors, as you said, 24, I think. But then
Yeah.
it kind of highlights, okay, this one you don't have to worry about so much. These are the really ones you need to address. So what do you think the next steps? What's your expectation for a report like this? To where does it get consumed, and what do you think happens next?
Well, Minister Bibeau already has a copy. I know that, so it's in government already, and I think like places like I said, Ag Canada, I think they will want to see the report, and I think they'll be very receptive. They just need ideas. I mean, they just need ideas. Sometimes in agriculture, you're overwhelmed by lobby groups and asks, and people come in just looking at their own little backyard
Narrow.
without
Yeah. Yeah.
really looking at the big picture. That this report allows politicians to say, well, here's the big picture and this is where we need to go. And so
Hmm.
it's already being used right now, which I'm very happy about. I don't want to brag, Michael, but we've been very successful in influencing policy over the last couple of years. Just this week, I was learning that the carbon tax, farmers out west will be exempt from the carbon tax, and this is due to a report that we actually submitted to the parliamentary committee looking at C206, which this private bill which exempts farmers from the carbon tax, and they actually voted yesterday 6 against 5. So we won that vote, and it's going to Parliament, and it will probably be accepted by Senate eventually over the summer. So we're pretty proud of the work we're doing with government, for government, and most importantly for the industry as well.
Well, and congratulations. I noticed that as well. I mean, and for the people, right? I mean, what I love about the work you do is it's it's lobby, it's agnostic. It's about the people, it's about the industry. Ultimately, it's about Canadians, right? Building a great economy, building food security.
Yeah, well,
Many
the argument
ways.
that we made to the committee was, well, be careful. I mean, the carbon tax is a very simple, easy to implement concept, but not all carbon taxes are created equal across the supply chain. I mean, and in farmers are price taker, and price taking economics are detrimental to the to farming farming communities across the country. They have no way to offset these extra costs. They have to pay the tax
Right.
and that's it. Whereas in processing or in retail, well, you still can do something. You have options, not in farming. And I think they understood that.
Well, I think a big role, as you know, is explaining unintended consequences to political leaders, right? If you do X, have you thought of Y? And these issues are complex, so congratulations again. Speaking of complexity, let me jump over here. Our friends in Montreal looks like they're trying to get into the food delivery business. Did you see this? That Montreal is the government, city of Montreal is spending $500,000 to encourage a Uber delivery competitor. Can you see a future for this, Sylvain?
Well, as you probably know, Michael, Quebec is trying to set up a Amazon site for Quebecers buying Quebec. It's called the Panier Bleu, the blue
Année
basket.
Bleu, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so they are developing a transactional platform for local products, and frankly, I'm always a little bit skeptical using public funding to support these initiatives because it's a really competitive landscape, and it got even more competitive over the last 14 months since the start of the pandemic, and so to see the city of Montreal invest $500,000 on this initiative to me is a complete waste of money because, well, first of all, it's an election year for the mayor. That's why she did it. It was easy to get
Mm,
support, but at the end of the day, you need marketing to support a platform like this. And right now, when you look at the television, when you look at websites, I mean, companies like Skip and Uber Eats and DoorDash, they're very aggressive and they have a lot of money to attract more customers. So
yeah.
I've enjoyed seeing restaurateurs getting together and create some of these platforms. Like it has happened in Toronto. I know St. Catharines in Ontario has actually done the same thing. Those are great initiatives because it's really about entrepreneurs getting together, creating a platform for themselves, encouraging people from local communities to encourage local restaurateurs, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as soon as municipalities or provinces get involved with e-commerce, it rarely works. I know. What do you think? I mean, you're an expert in retailing. What are your thoughts when you heard
Yeah.
about this?
Well, on the one hand, I don't mind the penne bleu strategy. I don't mind the idea of creating uh, a lower cost to the operator option. The challenge, as you rightly point out, is Uber and these places become a destination of themselves, and that creates the incremental volume for the restaurants. People go to Uber Eats to decide what they're going to eat versus going to the restaurant and then figuring out that they can get it from Uber Eats. That's what I hear in the industry that happens most often. So to the degree that Montreal can put into play, and they've got a lot of media as a city that they can put into play. I mean, on the surface, I don't know. I think it's more interesting than I think you think it is. It could work, and I don't mind it. And I know it addresses the issue, right? The issue is paying high fees to a company where maybe they can come together. I'm not sure how successful it's going to be because I think at the end of the day, they got to step on the gas on marketing, and that takes years, not months, and that takes a lot of resolve, and that's more than $500,000 for sure. But anyway, well, maybe I'm more sanguine about the strategy, but well, anyway, we'll
I
see.
my
Speaking
bet
of,
for our second anniversary episode next year,
yes,
we're going to be talking about
yes,
why it
this time
failed.
next year. Well, good for them for trying something. At least, they're doing something different anyway. I don't know if it's the right something.
I
As you
just
say, an election, you
I'm always a little bit skeptical. I wish entrepreneurs in Montreal would have gotten together and they could have done the same thing without involving the city. Because when you think about a platform like that, you have to think about updates. You got to make sure that people remain engaged, that everything is up to date, the information is there. Restaurants come and go. As soon as you start running an obsolete platform or a platform with obsolete information, it just pushes people away. And that's I
hmm,
think that's the part they're not thinking about right now. They're just thinking about getting people from Montreal into their restaurants. But for the first year, I mean, because of the pent up demand, it's not going to be an issue. I mean, people are going to just be focusing on normalizing the economy as much as possible.
yeah. So speaking of normalizing, we haven't talked about ButterGate in a while, and I think the last time we talked, and by the way, I'm now in this household. We're like exclusively grass-fed or organic. I've jumped that curb a little bit, so thanks to ButterGate, I've achieved that. So I think there's been some data that has come out over the time since we last spoke about ButterGate. So any updates for us on the status and what's going on in ButterGate?
Well, I mean, we've presented our findings to the Dairy Farmers of Canada. We were glad to do that to help them out, and of course, they were very quiet about the data we have. But I think clearly they know they had a problem. But my guess is that they'll start making changes. They'll start implementing changes without any sort of official announcement. There's an easy quick fix because you probably wouldn't have noticed, most Canadians wouldn't have noticed, but they've actually increased P5 quotas, which means they actually are allowing farmers to produce more butter fat, putting less pressure on them to generate more butter fat so they can actually get more cows
Hmm.
and everything else. So they're recalibrating their herd in order to produce more butter fat probably with less palmite and palm fat. So you can see that really the industry is acknowledging that there was a problem. Uh, on the farm, and they're making adjustments as it is. I'm really happy that we now have an article, a report ready to be submitted to an academic journal. Hopefully, within the next month or so, it will be accepted. We're also working on a second article with the University of Guelph with more data coming from the 51 samples we had. So this is going to be ongoing. We just want to build some science capacity for the future, because we just don't want this to happen again ever. It doesn't look good for our dairy sector, and we want to make sure that the dairy sector is well supported.
Yeah, getting right back to strong domestic supply and food security, right? It's a full circle. It's all interconnected. Last couple of things for you. Some random things, actually. I don't know if you noticed, but Wingstop, is it? Yeah, Wingstop said they're going to open 100 more restaurants in Canada. So, chicken wings. Like, why are chicken wings so popular? They seem to have kind of been this niche thing, buffalo wings. But now, there's a lot of chickens flying with no wings. I mean, like it's a fun story, right? I mean, chicken wings were like, as the legend goes, used to be just thrown out, and then somebody decided to put some flavor on them, and chicken wings were born. But 100 more locations. What's going on in with chicken wings? I guess they're just fun, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And people will want to get together after the pandemic for sporting events, hockey matches, football, and of course, chicken wings are often the first or second choice for a lot of people. It's great finger food, and I think that's why they're seeing. And when you think about chicken wings in Canada, there's not one major player right now, and I think so. I think Wingstop is seeing Canada as an opportunity just because of that. There's a gap there in the market. But are Canadians big chicken wing fans? I think they are, because they do eat a lot of chicken wings for during the Stanley Cup playoffs, which is going to be starting soon. And so because people will get together, I think there's a great market. But like I mentioned to you earlier, because there's going to be an exodus of restaurateurs leaving the market, well, there are going to be many opportunities that newcomers or people going into the market can capitalize on.
Well, and one of them is going to be real estate, because that is always, right place at the right time, and there'll be more of that as that gets shook out. Unfortunately, as things don't work out. Last thing I noticed, Longo's launched and is talking about the first grocer in the country with fair trade bananas. It's funny when you think about bananas and their history, pineapples and bananas. It's been a pretty interesting history, right? If you go back 100 years, I mean, half of the American foreign policy was around securing the sources of some of these fruits in faraway South American lands. So it's interesting that we said full circle a couple of times in this episode, but now we've got Longo's selling only fair trade bananas. So good for them, right?
Absolutely. I've never given a whole lot of thought to fair trade. I'll be honest with you, the last 20 years, we haven't done much work on fair trade in particular as a lab. But we've actually we received a call recently from Fair Trade Canada. And so we're in discussions to actually launch a report or a project with them, because I actually think that Longo's decision was very interesting. And we wanted to know what's the market currency for fair trade in general in Canada? Are people willing to pay a little bit more? Do they understand the impact of fair trade around the world? And there seems to be some momentum. I don't know what you think about this, but there seems to be some momentum around fair trade. So that's why we're actually giving it a second look, and we'll be probably launching a new study this summer with Fair Trade Canada on this issue.
It's interesting. It seems to have come, in my mind, it came from coffee first. Like you see mostly badging and branding around fair trade in the coffee industry, chocolate, these kind of things.
There
so
are
it seems
three
to be
commodities impacted by fair trade. You're right: coffee, cocoa, and bananas. Those are the top three commodities that have been impacted by fair trade.
Oh, so interesting. So interesting.
Yep.
All right. Well, listen, what a great episode. A year together. So thank you for joining me over this past year.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's hear.
Yeah,
It's
I remember the first episode. I wasn't sure exactly, what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing. You certainly know what you're doing, and I'm very thankful for that, Michael. It's been great.
Well, thank you for your partnership and all your insights. And we should remind all the listeners that now we have a YouTube channel, which is a pile of fun. So, as the kids would say, smash that subscribe button. Uh, get subscribe to that. And by the way, if you watch that YouTube channel, you see I seem to have three basic postures mostly: this and this. So there's a lot of me doing this and this actually.
And I've noticed that you close your eyes a lot.
I don't think I do, but I think the camera. I don't know. Anyway,
but I think you blink a lot. That's what I noticed. Yeah.
Well, things you never notice about yourself. But anyway,
you can't play poker. That's what I'm saying.
It's just your blinding insights. Just wake me up every time. That's what it is. All right. So and we should also remind the listeners that our bonus episodes, because we're again a supporter of Retail Council of Canada's Canadian Grand Prix. We've had our first bonus episode, very popular, Agri-Foods, and we've got 3 or 4 more that'll continue. So in between our episodes, we're going to have great bonus episodes where I get to talk to the real, the entrepreneurs, right? The people who are making food and they're creating great product. So many more of those coming up. So I've got several of those already booked. All right. So that's been, as I said, a great episode. Thanks again to the folks at Omnovotes for being our presenting sponsor. And if you like what you heard, you can follow us on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review. And be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the grocery, food service, or restaurant industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, producer and host of the Voice of Retail podcast and a bunch of other stuff.
And I'm Sylvain Charlebois.
Have a safe week, Sylvain, and everyone, have a safe week. See you next time.
Take care.